Okay, well, I was very interested when I heard about the theme for this session because when I first qualified as an academic a few years ago, you could just about still use the phrase Western civilization without having to spend an hour giving disclaimers and arguing with people about how you could use such a frightful term. And you could also say the West, the Western mind, Western culture, etc. And now these words are hugely problematized. I was also delighted to be here because I'm a parent of small children, and this point of a Saturday afternoon is where I start to run out of things to do with them. Mm. And I mean, one offers this on film. Now, I don't know how many of you have had the misfortune to watch a kids' film that's been made in the last 10 or 20 years, but they are all invariably awful. And for that reason, I decided to start watching classic kids' films from the 80s and 90s with them, the films which I remembered from my youth. Now, what you'll notice if you watch those classic films from the 80s and 90s is there's a natural, unreflective self-confidence in something we can call Western civilization or the Western project. I'm talking about a set of unquestioned assumptions that by and large, the way of life in Western societies is broadly good. People generally live well in the Western world, so they have, for the most part, an enviable quality of life, not only materially, but also in terms of our freedom. The good of the Western project is such that it's also worthy of being defended, and, for the most part, its endurance is assured. Now, we seem to have lost that sense of unquestioned, unreflective assumption and self-confidence. The question is whether or not this means we're under siege. Well, a siege is a military operation in which a settlement is surrounded by enemy forces, and there's a standoff until one side backs down. Things become problematic at the point that morale begins to be eroded. That's when it starts to split, fall apart, and different groups start arguing about the terms by which we might surrender. Now, some of this would seem to apply to the West. It can feel like we're under siege in terms of the geopolitical situation and so on, and our vulnerability to food and energy supplies and so on. But what I want to do, time permitting, is go on what will seem like a tangent and just reflect for a moment on the fact that Western societies are also unique because we're the only society I can think of in history in which the concept of self-care has become a thing. Now, I'm skeptical of much of the discourse on self-care, but the fact it's become a thing in countries like this one in our time is instructive. Nowhere else in history has there been an issue with people allegedly neglecting to care about themselves, failing to prioritize unquestioningly their own self-preservation and well-being. Never before have people felt the need to focus consciously on basic components of human life like eating, sleeping, walking, getting your steps in, remembering to talk to other people. We're now made to believe that self-destruction is part and parcel of the human condition for the population at large, and I think this is a new thing. This would suggest to me the decisive moment, the breakdown of morale, is very much belongs to our moment of history. There's a waning of self-confidence, of self-belief, of the energy and passion of those near the city's gates. Every age has its ups and downs, its external threats, its geopolitical vulnerabilities, its economic challenges, its moral quandaries. I don't think Winston Churchill sat down in 1939 and decided to have a self-care day. We need, therefore, to remind ourselves of certain basic primary principles about Western civilization, things which, if properly accepted, can put things back in order again. These include the fact that the Western mind is not about tribalism, even less about a particular race or races, nor geopolitical or cultural dominance. It's about universality, having basic tenets which amount to a defense of humanity itself, not merely against others. This includes the universality and immutability of human nature over against threats like racial essentialism and gender ideology. It involves the belief that democracy has, by and large, proved particularly effective for attaining the common good in history. It includes the belief that there's an interlinked web of human rights and duties enmeshed in a set of obligations and civic duties. And it's ever mindful of the danger of tyranny and authoritarianism and the necessity of distinct local and national cultures. One thing I also think we need to do, and this never goes down with people, is be a bit more realistic about the Christian origins of many of these principles and how we've tended to be amnesiac about that in the past. So to finish, I think we need to cultivate that sense you'll see in a great late 80s kids film. The way of life in Western societies is broadly good. People generally live well in the Western world. They have, for the most part, an enviable quality of life, and we should be far more assured of our ability to endure That is the common case today.